Hey everybody, it's Petey from the Spinner Rack, and I know it's been a little while from our group. We gave you a couple comic book heroes. We had a comic book hero with us. Could you say hello to the people out there?
Hey, Calvin Ellis here, comic book hero in full effect and ready to rock.
So, I've got a number of New Mutant videos, which some of you guys have checked out. I mean, it's not, it's not like it's going viral, but you guys have watched some of my New Mutants, and we in Comic Book Hero, Calvin have done at least, I think at least one of them on there where we looked at the numbers. So, I mean, we could do that now, but we're gonna just do a reaction to the Cartoonist Kayfabe guys. These guys are, I guess as far as podcasters on YouTube, the top in the business, and we in at the top. They get the top talent. They get Rob Liefeld on there, and this is about almost every interview Rob talks about how bad the New Mutants was doing, how close to cancellation it was, and no matter how many times I put up numbers showing you that just one crossover would put the New Mutants back to the top 10 status. Pros, these guys, Mark Miller, they all say that it was near cancellation, and I pointed out that the New Mutants cost 25 cents more than the rest of the comic books, so it wouldn't even matter if it was the lowest selling X book, because 25 cents more at a book that sells about the same as Spider-Man before Todd McFarlane got there, that's not a bad book. I mean, it's not a bad book for even the X books, but people like to color their tales of woe with the lowest selling X book, which is oxymoron. One of the books have to sell less. You don't have to kill yourself to get it to sell more. But hey, it's an X book. It needs to be selling in the millions when it wasn't at that time. But I have a bunch of those books here somewhere, but I think I showed you guys. But let's listen, and we're going to react. Rob is going to on here, and I'm going to flip out when he complains about bird brain, but let's keep going. You ready?
Welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piskor. I'm Jim Rugg. We have Rob Liefeld in the house with us, man, and we're going to take a look at New Mutants 87. Rob, thank you so much for showing up. Man.
Oh, so where were you at when you saw this book?
Evan?
Yes.
I'm in a comic store and I passed on it.
At this point, I was reading I was still keeping up with the New Mutants. I was upset that the artist who did that corner box up there, Brett Belvins, was leaving. But there was hint that Rob was coming, and he redid an image that Arthur Adams did with the original X-Men, and he did them with the New Mutants with Cable. I don't know, was Cable there? I think Cable was in. In Marvel Age, they were showcasing Rob's stuff. He kind of looked like Arthur Adams, but kind of a little more bulky than that. So I was kind of like, hey, this could be cool. And then you got Todd McFarlane inked two covers. The other cover was a homage to a Spider-Man cover, which Todd inked. And I was just like, and I think I've seen him on X Factor and X-Men. So he's kind of around, and what's the thing? Hawk and Dove, I've seen that too. So he was kind of around. So I was like, hey, this could be the push that the New Mutants need. I didn't feel that they really needed a new instructor, but he didn't look half bad. Let's see what happens, right? And
yeah, I'm here and I'm hot. Let's go.
Yeah, dude, you're spicy.
My head's on fire.
You're spicy.
Our pre-chat. I'm already hot. Let's go.
Bought these books off the racks, and the name that I knew on the cover was McFarlane. I wasn't familiar with your work before then, but I was grabbing Spider-Mans. I was grabbing Hulks from first grade forward. That's a name I recognize. Okay. But this badass image, this is second grade for me.
Yeah.
And seeing this badass dude with that name I knew, jumped on board with this, man, instantly attracted.
Yeah, I always wonder where, because I don't remember what put it on my radar. It's funny that we both bought this as our first issue, but it might have been a Marvel Age or something. I was just in. So it was whatever I was reading promo that looked cool, and I feel like it might have been a Marvel Age that was highlighting this new character that was coming out.
So how does Tom, all this Tom talk, how does McFarlane get involved as anchor here? Is it your suggestion, Rob?
It's a little long here. We talked about how Todd gets involved. Let's see how long that is. I'm stretching it out. All right, so let's go to here.
What's the thought?
Well, as we open this up, I gave them almost all the 13 new characters you're going to see here.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Ed and Jim, here's the deal. What you're asking me about is creation, and as we go through this, it's this love. I don't have any hate with this because I cut a better deal than everybody who worked with me, and that's a fact. And Marvel will tell you that, even though they don't like to tell you about that, but they'll tell you that. Young Robbie Liefeld, maybe the best thing he was a businessman, and he knew what was going on in terms of I can get character, what's it called? What did they call it? Is it
Participation?
Yes, there you go. Character participation agreements, character shares. So I was all in, and so I'm throwing all these characters because, honestly, maybe the most important thing we can do as I wheel slightly out of frame.
Here we go.
Here
we go. It's gonna happen. We got another bird brain talk. I think it's coming.
So I bought these omnibuses recently, and they took me back to the pre-New Mutants Rob Liefeld, and why this
is why we're here,
was
everybody.
A shit show. And it was a shit show. And it was a shit show because it didn't really offer anything exciting. It was like bad, they call it bad YA, fantasy. You know why you didn't know about this book and you hadn't come to it yet? Hey, look at Bird Brain, everybody. Hey, kids, that's who your moms, want you to grow up to be is Bird Brain. That's who you want. You want, holy shit. And especially whenever
Excuse
these new
Mars
episodes
to give us the curse words.
Oh,
Okay.
Come on, man. When I was a kid, I'm like.
So to put it in proper context, that was the Fall of Mutants. That was a. I think I'm gonna make me have to do this. Oh God.
That was pretty tactless. Okay.
But that's the thing with to put it in a proper.
Isn't Rob the same guy who goes on and he's like, yeah, I love. Well, he likes to trash that type of stuff. Cap Wolf, Bird Brain. He loves to trash that. But I don't know. He's for somebody who I know can be very reactionary to certain commentary about his own stuff. You would think he'd have a little bit more tact, just a little. I wasn't a regular New Mutants reader. I mean, I came in and out because of Avengers versus X-Men, and Magneto had become the leader of the X-Men, so like de facto leader of the New Mutants. I had been following up to that point, and then I think when that wrapped itself up, I pretty much was out once again. And McFarlane, I wasn't reading him on Spider-Man, it was Hulk, but I was a big Hulk reader at the time. So a lot of the stuff that went on with New Mutants, I caught up to later. But by the time I caught up to it, the book was canceled, or at the very least, they had decided they weren't doing New Mutants anymore. They were going to do X-Force. However, we could bottom line this strictly going the Rob Liefeld way and looking at the numbers. So instead of hitting Bird Brain, well, what were the numbers on the book? In comparison to, what the other books were selling. And then of course, when he comes on, that's the simplest thing. I think hitting the character in the manner in which he did him is pretty tactless.
Well, that's exactly where I wanted to go. So if we go to I think this is one of the first issues that Brett Belvins did. I think this is before Bird Brain. New Mutants is a top 10 book. There we go. We got some annuals in there. We gotta expect New Mutants to be pushed down, but this is in Comic Con. They're going for the monthly sales for this. That's for June. And see the top books. The Silver Surfer was a top book at one point. And they don't have any sales for that month. was from Diamond. Nam was a top 10 book at one point, telling you what kind of where the comic book industry was at. And New Mutants at number 7. I think this is around when Bird Brain was introduced, but it's leading up to an X-Men crossover, and that's the other thing you can't forget when you're thinking about the New Mutants is that this is a different thing. When the X-Men and X Factor going through the Fall of Mutants, Millennium is coming. Now nobody mentions Millennium, but look at it. It just pushes everything down. New Mutants gets to number 10 spot, right? So let's go to October. New Mutants. Look at that, number 4. Fall of the Mutants. We caught up. This is during the Bird Brain period. I don't think he's on the cover, but let's keep going. And I understand it's not. And this is where they say goodbye to Bird Brain here. Look, this is number 3. This is the Fall of the Mutants, so he wasn't there for that long. I think it's like 58 to 63, but you see it's a small picture there, but I don't know if we can show it. Let's go into this thing. But anyway, it's number 3 here, right? And I've done this before. It's really tiring to have to keep showing you guys the sales. Look at that, Dead Doug. I think you mentioned this, and this thing is gonna come up. It's number 3 where they reincarnate Doug Ramsey, and it's an X book. Yes, you can say that it's it's not in the thing of what you see. Rob in the direction it takes after that. I mean, come on, She-Hulk's number 1 book at one point, but top 10. And look at that, 75. Oh, this is the one that Byrne did, which was with Magneto versus what's the name? And it's top 10 books still. So I just want to put that out there before we get to the trashing that the New Mutants is going to get before he got there. That it was a dumpster fire, all this other stuff, and I mean, it's not really telling you what it is, but you're gonna hear them say that they got the numbers. But I will say, this is the thing, the approach that they take is the same approach that Rob took, is the same approach that Chris Claremont was doing, right? Where they introduce a whole new set of villains, like the way the Alpha Flight or the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. The X-Men was good for creating a whole bunch of a new group of them to fight. So they'd have the Reavers, the Marauders, and the Mutants introduced in this issue. I don't have it up right now, but let me put it back up. They introduced the Mutant Liberation Front. So it was like it was doing what the key success to the X-Men is that the creators would put for X amount of characters into the book, more so than any other book that you would do. They would just put, kind of stock villains, and people would say, well, they're just kind of cardboard cutouts. One of them looks like the lunatic from the Defenders, and one of the characters from there, they're like kind of stock things, but it works. It works that kids got new adversaries for these characters to fight, and and that's one of the key things of the X-Men, where whether it be generic, it just worked. They just kind of did it. So let's keep going, and we're gonna end it. We're not gonna go through this whole thing because it's an hour, but
who thought this was a good idea? Like and look at these. I don't want to, this was the villain they were battling, guys. This guy with something on his head and thick spectacles. Okay, like so he'd have extra bulging eyes. I mean, this was this and freaking the God of Inking is inking this. The God of Inking, Terry, like this was your brother's New Mutants right there. This is what you were getting. Look at this. Look at this. So let's have context here. Let me try and get these frames right. And Brett Blevins, by the way, is a brilliant illustrator. Yeah. He would be the best illustrator at this time at Disney Animation Studios, working on Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast. Like, he is a premier illustrator. He was a poor choice for a family of X-Men books.
I can't. The Silvestri was supposed to be the artist who did Great Kids, and Brett Blevins did Great Kids. The editorial felt that the New Mutants were getting too long in the tooth and they were getting too grown, so he made them younger, going against making them bulky and that sort of thing. They're supposed to be kids, and that's why he was brought in there. And Rob gave them back to being bulky, that sort of thing. But the hook is that they didn't want these guys to grow up that quickly, right? Because you have a book that's going to be going on forever. You're not supposed to just graduate, become as old as the X-Men, and the X-Men are only in their 20s. So that was the hook of why they picked him. And he's a great illustrator for kids. And but somehow, Rob Liefeld kind of saying that the YA audience, he kind of had more of a connection. But I don't think there was too much. The age difference was very, very slight between the two of them. Maybe Rhett was a little bit older, but it's just an approach of him and giving him something closer to what Arthur Adams did as far as how they looked age-wise, and how Arthur and Rob gave him how the dynamic kind of bulky type of heroes. So it's just a different sort of thing. And the stories, yep, you can say the guy with the glasses, all that stuff. In proper context, it's sold. I can't defend and say Rob isn't more like comic book kind of worthy than that stuff, but it's sold. So what do you say about that? You say it should be torn down. What a mistake made for the. I'm speaking for you, but just jokingly. But what do you say?
If you're an artist and you're at the behest of the direction that you're being given, what are you going to do? If they want the guys to look younger, okay, that's what you're going to do. And a younger character is going to have less lines, slimmer body, so on and so forth. Now, if the trend is that guys really want to see overly muscled characters, with the cargo bandoliers that never get used, then of course those two things are in competition with each other, or rather in conflict with each other. So I could maybe give a little bit more credence to this if Liefeld had a different style than what he does. And I've said this before, like you have a guy like John Byrne. John Byrne can draw. Mm-hmm. John Byrne has his own distinct style, but John Byrne could easily draw something and make it look like Kirby. He could look like Bob Kane rather. He could make something look like Jim Aparo. He's really good. He's a very good artist. Whereas a lot of the guys who came up in the 90s had their own particular style. Jim Lee has his style. Silvestri has his style. Rob Liefeld has his style. If the trend had been, look, we want these guys to look slimmer, this type of stuff, and that's what people wanted, Liefeld would have been out, because I've never seen him have that type of malleability when it comes to his style. So the criticism for me falls flat. Look, you have a trend. At the same time, the guy who's there is there because that's what they want and that's what they're asking for. And then they say, well, he should have never been there. Well, he's the guy who was asked to be there. So what's supposed to happen? You got swept up in you got swept up in which would of course be that image trend of again, the big muscle, all the gear on, the gun, bandolier, one eye glowing, that type of stuff, and that's where the cats were at. So you were the right guy for that particular milieu of what was going on, but that's not to discredit the other artists. He was there, and he was asked to be there for the reason. Time period just wasn't where we were.
Yeah. All right, so there's going to be a couple things here, and then we're going to go into it. It's going to lead us to another discussion.
That were super macho. Okay? Wolverine's killing people all over the place. They've given him his own series. He's knifing people left and right. He's standing on 100 dead bodies every issue. He's the featured character. Mark Silvestri has women taking off their clothes all the time, taking baths in convenient waterfalls in the pages of the X-Men. And then, wait, kids, this is what you want from your mutant. Caw! And Bird Brain is featured.
Stuff like that. Stuff like that is just unnecessary.
He was supposed to be a...
Mm-hmm.
It's so low. It's petty. It's just unnecessary. At the end of the day, you're going to hit for a character that was there. 5 issues total?
Yeah.
5 issues total. And then again, Bird Brain is in the same vein as a character like Nightcrawler. Because if not, what do you have? You have all of the mutants, and they're all what? They all look like models. They're all, they got wonderful Barbie body proportions. They're taking, they always find a way to take a bath, like is it outside someplace in a very applicable waterfall. No, the whole idea of some of these guys are supposed to look like freaks in nature.
Yes.
And Nightcrawler was like the first one who was actually on the X-Men. I mean, it goes back as far as Toad, if you will. But Nightcrawler was like the first one who was definitively on the X-Men. And then, so of course, you have these guys who will come in. You'll have a Bird Brain. You have somebody like Marrow, Caliban, and they come in, from here to there. So, what he's saying there is again, it's really tactless, and it doesn't seem to understand the tradition of what these characters are supposed to represent. Is Bird Brain like this, again, groundbreaking character? No, but to keep slating it at the end of the day, okay, you want to hit what you feel is the weakest point, ignore everything else, including that the book is still selling in spite of the fact of these hits that you're doing. As a reader, this is what it seems. As a reader, you really just didn't like the character. I've met these types. The guys like, oh, I hate Robin, even though Robin and Batman are like peanut butter and jelly. It's going to be very difficult to get rid of Robin, but they still just really dislike this character. If that's the case, then you do show them why, why I hate Bird Brain, get everything out and do that. But to slate the book, the storyline, the art, the artist, and it stems from that, pretty disingenuous.
Well, yeah, and then this is another thing where they just allow him no one's they didn't read they're kids, they weren't reading the New Mutants, so it's fine. But here he says that Bird Brain was going to be Colossus, and then, well, if he wasn't going to be Colossus, why didn't they have to get rid of him during the Rob's thing? No, he was already gone.
Convenient waterfalls in the pages of the X-Men, and then, wait, kids, this is what you want from your mutant. Caw! And Bird Brain is featured the way that they featured Colossus when the X-Men relaunched. He was supposed to be a character of focus. He is featured on cover after cover. Bird Brain, the very dull, very uninteresting, very
It was not Colossus. That's what I want to make sure that, there was no chance. He's in there from 58 until they leave at the end of the what's the name, and he doesn't show up again, because at the same time they were doing something different. Plus they also had Warlock there already, so Warlock had that weird oddity thing. But it's important to say, when you see someone that's odd, these New Mutants accepted the character. That's the thing, and what you pointed out is really the key to one of the X-Men books, which is kind of what I think outside of Rogue, like, you're taking on a character that keeps getting hotter and hotter that the X-Men take in. It's just like, the Rogue, she can't touch it. Like, come on, she's got what's her name's power, so it's like she doesn't have it that hard. So it's like the idea of every time they try to do something that's really, here's this character that's misshapen, like you say, like Nightcrawler. They kind of, with Nightcrawler gone, when Sylvester was doing it, the X-Men got a little extra sexy. It was like Brutes and Babes type of book, where it was like at some point you'd have the X-Men, they look like oddities. But anyway, you're going to get to the sales, and then you're going to talk about how much he contributed to the plot. And I just wanted to talk about that. If we get to it.
New Mutants. So I am asked to step in, and as I've told you many times, I was offered X Factor. Do you want to follow Walt Simonson on X Factor? Hell no. Hell no. Why would I follow a Hall of Fame great when I can go give this book exactly what it needs? Again, let's get it on tape. Here I am, Brett Blevins, brilliant illustrator.
I think he would have been okay on X Factor. X Factor was the number 2 book at Marvel, depending on the month. But at the same time, I don't think that it was going to drop. But those 2 X books were like, when they had a whole bunch of different artists before Willis Portacio got on it, they was selling. So I don't think he would have had any problems on it. There's no slight to Walter Simonson. I love him. He's one of the best. But this new theory,
bad fit for X-Men book, in my opinion, my humble opinion. Now I believe
don't agree with that either.
That opinion out by
everyone. He didn't want to go on X Factor because there's not enough hot chicks.
Your character focus completely shifts with here. You wanted to talk about Cougar. I just never got around to bringing him in because I saw how everything I this was a franchise starving for a star. Okay, like in the basketball world, the New Mutants was the Sacramento Kings. 15 years between playoff appearances, and last night, oh, they're going back to the playoffs for the first time in 15 years. Oh, this once left behind franchise. Okay, that's the New Mutants, man. It had been left behind, and so little Robbie Liefeld says, and yes, I will call my young 20 self little Robbie Liefeld. They're like, can you come in here and fix this? And literally Bob Harris says, Rob, what about putting an adult figure in? I'm like, yeah, let me put a commando guy, and he's going to be from the future, and he's going to have ties to the X-Men family and all this. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go. And here you see Wildside. You see Strobe, you see Reaper, you see the great Thumbelina, okay? Those are all my characters. Also, Marvel Age did a 2-part feature called Rob Liefeld's New Mutant Sketchbook. It was such a big deal. They did 2 issues of it. That is part of time itself. That is historical recorded fact. And as you know, so there's Tempo. So I had a Youngblood illustration for Megaton. She's in it.
Yep.
Again, but you know what? So there's a perfect example. Tempo suddenly is co-created by someone else who had jack and shit to do with the co-creation. But you know that walking in. There was nothing. I didn't have blinders on. I'm like, yeah, this is bullshit. But you know what? I'm going to gamble. If I can plant 25 trees and have some of that fruit come over on my side of the fence and feed my family, good for me. But you know it going in. But in years past, when people go, oh, that's a co-creation, I'm like, what part of the co-creation happened without me? I'd love to know. I would love to know. Because as I've told people, this is the easiest way to do it. I sold these characters to Marvel.
Right.
I said, I want to give these all. Cable was part of it. When it came part.
I'm not here to disagree too much on this part, but he has a heavy slant against the talent he was working with. If you go to those Marvel Ages where they were, what he talks about enjoying working with Louise Simonson. Of course, obviously, if you're going to take behind the scenes, you might have wanted it, but we're calling on what happened in Marvel Age, right? So I have to mention that to keep it in the proper context. Now, I'm not saying you can say pretty much the same thing for the original. Sorry, you gonna say something?
No, you're good.
So you can say close to the same thing when Dave Cockrum had his sketchbook and he was working with Lin Wen on the backgrounds and stuff on these characters, and he looked at different characters, and they had Typhoon and he had the Black Cat, and he said, well, let's put the white hair on the Black Cat and give her the Storm powers. And that's how they came up with Storm. But most of it, Nightcrawler, Colossus, Storm, Thunderbird. There was some costume changes for like Thunderbird. A lot of that came out of Dave Cockrum's sketchbook, which many people have said, and I'm pretty sure Louise. That's why they were showcasing his sketchbook to showcase the part that he was playing in this. But at the same time, they were working with the writers, right? So the Marvel collaboration. And one of the things is the direction that it takes. I would like to ask to you. So I'm the artist, right? You're the writer, right? You give me a plot, 6 pages, and I disregard that plot, right? And I draw it, and the editor's like, you know what? These characters are too cool for me to edit out, and we're publishing it as is. Should I get nothing? Should you get nothing because I came up with all this stuff and I disregarded your plot wholly? Or should it still, you're dialoguing it, should you be a part of this thing? Is it, if you disregard the plot and minimally use it, should the writer just be kicked out? How do you feel on that?
That's already resolved. If I do a collaboration with usually it's not a collaboration. Usually it's work for hire. I have a story. I need an artist. I tell the artist exactly what I want. That's everything, from the character designs, everything. Okay, so it's not like I'm asking them, hey, can you come up with something like, no, I want the character to look exactly like this. I'll give some images, they work at it until it's exactly what I want. That's one thing. Collaboration is closer to, what, the Kirby and Stan Lee would be doing, where, I got an idea here and you go back and forth with it, but you do work together on it. What Liefeld is doing, and I hope people understand it too. He understands that, and I didn't fault him for this, but at the time with Marvel, it's like, yeah, if you create a new character, you got a percentage. If those characters, if it was a character that hit, like something like a Deadpool, you are, going to get a percentage for that character. So what's better for you to do? Look at the plot and go along with that, or totally dismiss that and come up with your own stuff? It's yours then, right? So in order to cover people in situations like that, doesn't matter, because both the artist and the writer are still credited for that particular issue when they come in. So even if you decided, look, I'm going to take all of this, at the end of the day, it's still going to be a co-creation, okay? Because you were both on the book as artist, writer. Oh, well, I didn't regard your plot whatsoever. Well, thanks for not regarding it, because I'm still going to get co-creator credit regardless, because I'm on the book. And that's how it works. So you can argue now, okay, and to be honest, to that extent, in hindsight, it's not the smartest move, because you're still going to get the they're still going to get the co-creator credit regardless. You can argue now, oh, I did all this type of stuff myself. Yeah, but you weren't necessarily supposed to. You understood how it works. And so this person is going to get co-creator credit whether you decide to go along with it or not. And that's actually to shield people from somebody doing something like a Rob Liefeld, because this person's like, well, wait a minute, I wrote all this and it's thrown out. He's going to get full credit. No, you're both going to get credit. We got the Liefeld clause just for situations like this.
And well, that's the other thing. And when you talk about the sketchbooks, this means that whatever conference they were having, they were looking at the sketchbooks, talking things over. And yes, that's like, I guess like the Alpha Flight, came out of Burns' thing. Burns designed all of them and came up with them. And, it's a point now that him and Chris Claremont share the co-creation on that. But the idea of like you're talking, working this out, and you're saying, hey, I got all these characters. Oh, when he comes in, this is a plotting session. And they're saying, well, wait a second, if I didn't have these characters, what would you have done? Well, she would have just came up with some names and you would have designed them, and then it would still be co-creation. So it's like, it's kind of hard to be like this sort of thing where it's like, oh, because so many people beforehand, comics was so collaborative, where you have a Silver Surfer kind of thrown into a plot, whether it be that Stan gave Jack the most minimal plot ever, and the Kirby threw in the Silver Surfer. At some point while they were working together, it was fine. It was just like, hey, this guy needs that, and Stan's like, yeah, we should do more with him, and he works more well into the plot. So it's like this fine line of while you're working together and throwing in characters and coming up with things. Whereas I think in the biggest one would be Byrne and Claremont, but at the same time, there's so many points where Byrne turns and says, well, this, Wolverine trying to approach the deer, that was Claremont. At that point, both of us were trying to just tack on as much stuff we could, top each other as far as Wolverine. And it's like, well, this thing, all I did was come up with the look for this character. This thing, I did this. And it's like that back and forth, but at the same time, not taking away the co-creation part of it. And he's just like, I'm not even going to mention Louise's name. And the same for when he does New Mutants 98, he doesn't talk about Fabian Nicieza either, which I think at some point they were friends. I think it went south with the Image thing. But I think there's a couple when I just want to get to them saying that it was selling bad again, and we'll stop it.
Cougar, as you know, I did a cover with Cougar.
Yeah.
Todd colored it. Todd inked it. It was about to go. I did yank him because I knew that maybe you also got to realize Coach McFarlane would call me shortly after this. Oh, Bud, what are you doing giving all those characters to Marvel? Like, You're making us look bad. Absolute sentence. They're expecting all of us to give them characters now. I'm like, dude, you do your thing, I'll do mine. Like, I'm just gonna do my thing. Because my book is like, this was a body that needed all the paddles, right, guys?
That's what I remember about it.
Yeah.
Say what?
That's one of the things I remember about this book is it was right at the cutoff where low sales meant it would go direct market. And it was right there whenever you take over, like on the edge of going direct market due to those low sales.
Yes. All part, again, of historical fact. The one thing that I do on the Robservations is I go to the sales figures, I go to the rankings, and I show you guys. Because, there's always somebody who wants to fight me. No, this was one of the top sellers. Horseshit.
We just showed you. Yeah, I just showed you 75 was at the top 10 mark. It's one crossover away from being, Acts of Vengeance. Say they stayed on, but that's the thing. What facts did they show here? Where did they show you that it was just about to be canceled? That's the last part. That is like when that's the problem with when you have.
Facts, just let me bash bird brain. And the whole idea with. Because again, it becomes very hard to swallow when you look. This is a top 10 book, and it was ready for the direct market before he got on. How? Like, when did you get on? Okay, but, and there's a very big difference between, which I think is reasonable. You can look at a book, and the book is a top 10 book, but you still don't like the direction.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. You say
that's yes.
I don't like the direction. This is top 10, but. I don't think it's going to stay there for long, or, it's top 10, but where are we going to go? We're going to hit the ground on this. And that's just good. That's very good editorial foresight to say, hey, maybe change the direction on this. That I think is 100% reasonable. But to say, well, look, because they wanted some change, it wasn't selling, like, well, no, two things can be true at the same time in that, yes, the book was selling, and yes, they still wanted to change the direction.
Yeah.
I think it's the more reasonable approach in this case. And again, I'm looking at the numbers. Top 10 book. When was this book ever in the jeopardy of cancellation? When was this book ever jeopardy of cancellation? Knowing how long it takes for a book to go from top 10 to a position that it would be cancellation.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a while. That's not something that's going to happen. I mean, I've never heard of a book, it was a top 10 book, and at the end of the year was canceled.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you have a book, it's not like a book that what the kayfabe guy was describing, Jim Rogue was describing was Namor, like the Byrne run on Namor. That was a book that went to the direct sales market. That what's the name? New Mutants was not anywhere near doing that sort of thing. It was just going to be. It's going to be just in the direct market, just in the newsstands. It's like it's already a 25 cents more. I've already shown enough to say yes. During the time before he got there, there's a number. The X-Men go bi-monthly. Same with Wolverine. Like there's Batman is killing it out there. There's a ton of Batman things. So it's like to stay in that top 10, it didn't. I'm not saying, not in the same instance, the same way Silvestri was doing the top 10 X-Men book, and Jim Lee got on there, and it bumped it up, who knows how much, before it got to the 8 million mark for that one issue. So it's like the same when New Mutants got bumped up, the same with when Willis Portacio got on to X Factor. It was rolling even more at that point, and the same with Silvestri got to Wolverine. That was a top 10 book, and then they were the top guys. In the same instance with Spider-Man was a seller, but it was a big seller with Todd McFarlane. So it's not the only thing we're saying here is that it's not Daredevil. It's not Roger McKenzie and Frank Miller taking over Daredevil. It was a book that was okay. It might have been the lowest of the X books, but it wasn't. It was in the range of the Punisher, where the Punisher was probably, before Rob got there, doing a little better than it. with the Punisher and Punisher War journals. But those books led you to the X-Men.
A little bit more to that, as to I don't think a lot of guys understand what comics were like previous, to the to who would eventually become the Image guys going on, and you'd have these big number sales, because not every Marvel book, even of those like that that Magnificent 12, if you will, that came out of the 60s, between 61 and 64, not all of those books would be really high selling books at the end of the day, because you have guys like I'm loath to put them in category, but you mentioned Daredevil, and Daredevil was a character that had been regularly published. Okay, the X-Men got canceled effectively, but those guys were in reprints. Daredevil had never been in that situation where his book wasn't selling, but the numbers on his book were low, to the point that some books only came out every 2 months, which a lot of guys I don't think will be able to understand. Even I don't remember, because I'm still doing a lot of back issues at the point. But Daredevil was a book, even when Miller was there and it was selling and the numbers had picked up, it was still every 2 months you were getting that book. So like, hey, when you got the first appearance of Elektra, that's great. It was 2 months before you saw 169. Okay, that's how it was working. And it wasn't until I think 172, first Kingpin fight, and then it's a monthly book again. So yeah, that's a book right over there. That's okay. This is a book that's struggling. We're gonna make it once every two. And even in that instance, Marvel didn't cancel Daredevil. They didn't cancel Daredevil like, all right, buddy, you're out of here. Like, no, we'll go once every 2 months, because we can still. And that's something that was like a facet from the golden age, where you could do that. You could put out a book quarterly. You could put out a book, you could put out a book bi-monthly. And the New Mutants were not, to the best of my research and knowledge, they were never in that position. Okay, unless you want to be, and today you could do that, unless you really want to be postmodern and hypercritical, like, well, we're not selling 5 million copies anymore, so I guess we've lost our gas. You're like, no, you're selling 3 million. You're selling 3 million, but that's still. Then you look at it and say, okay, we were selling 5 at an apex. We were selling 5, but 3's not a nadir for us at the end of the day. And what is the average book selling? If the average book is selling 250,000 copies, and we're selling 3 million, well, we're still pretty well ahead of the pack, and we know that our ceiling is 5 million. And that's how we proceed from it there. But and again, this to the layman, if I was listening to this, and then I've got to give Rob Liefeld, he's doing, he's a creator, he worked in comics, he knows people, he was there when these things were happening. You want to give as much credit is due. Yeah. But, you peel back just a little bit of some pages to do a little bit of reading, like, okay, this doesn't quite jive with what you're saying. And again, it's just like a hit job, a needless hit job at the end of the day. You're very proud of the work you did on New Mutants. Great. Okay, everybody has a good memory of it. Great. It goes on, does other stuff with X-Force. Great. But you are literally just taking a bucket of scat and throwing what came there before, and manipulating a lot of the history in order to make it seem like, look, this book was literally under the toilet until I got there. From what I'm seeing, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the only reason, to point this out, because I understand it's a great feeling to build up a book, and he, it's not a slight to say he took this book that was on the the lowest seller of the X books, and you put it in, it's competing with X Factor and X-Men Monthly, that sort of thing, where I don't think it got that close, but as time went on, you have X-Men, New Mutants 98, which is like one of the top books, and I think he talks about the sales of a 100, and they had a gold issue of 100, so the book was doing pretty well under him. And I think Fabian Nicieza was like, with the book selling, they weren't really ready to give up the New Mutants, and they're like, well, and then Fabian Nicieza said he came to his back saying, no, like, another book with X in the title is going to be good, and it's going to be continuing what we did on New Mutants, so it's just going to take it even further. So it's not, the thing of it is like this extra thing that people are doing is saying, with you got the kayfabe, you got Mark Miller and Rob saying how bad it was selling, and for me, the approach that Louise, they just gotten back to Earth. They connected with X Factor, which was the most important thing if you're, as far for me, more than having Cable, even though he's a fun character, having him connect with the New Mutants connect with the original X-Men, which is something I felt needed to happen, a long time ago, which was, they were staying with them for a while. I think that could have worked, but the success of Cable is self-evident, so it works. He was a fun character. It's not, none of these characters are with characters with stuff we hadn't seen before, but the important part is saying, like, a lot of creators were trying to say, well, I'm trying to, unless I have something really that's out of the box different, then I can throw that out there. But I don't want to give you my version of the what's the name, the Salem 7. I don't want to give you my version of the Alpha Flight, where the Image guys said, no, kids want that. And they were smart to do it, and it's very successful. So it's just this thing of this slant that you say. I think, thank you for pointing that out, how heavy it is, because it's hard for me to put in words, but it's just like just tearing apart this stuff and not keeping it in context that, hey, it did sell, but it might be not, if you look at it now and be like, what the hell? I don't get this character. I don't get that character. That shouldn't have been in the X book. Some things are going to be in X books that you don't expect. So anyway, I guess we should close there. We did thank you for doing it, being a little. What's you going to say something?
I'm going to go a little further with that, because that's, I think, is a big problem with the approach to comics from the past, and a lot of the a lot of the fiction, be it in terms of films or comics or books, that, well, maybe not so much books, but the way that people are approaching stuff, right now with this, literally like a Liefeld bent, where, oh, look at what they did. Look, this is, look how stupid this is. I can't imagine how they did that. I'm like, no. What was the time? What was the time? And, what was the purpose of doing this? It wasn't like, hey, I need a character, Bird Brain. No. I can understand Bird Brain was in Batman or something, and he was Batman's new sidekick. So instead of Robin, it was Bird Brain. And even then, I would want to see, what the hell is the story? Is Bird Brain like some creation of Batmite?
Mm-hmm.
But you have a time period in the Golden Age, in the Silver Age, where the majority of comic book readers are kids. We're talking between 8 and 12, and then it starts to tack higher and higher as time goes by. Marvel comes in, you start getting more teenagers, and then you even get people who are like, maybe in the second year of college, and they're still reading, and so that broadens, which is not bad, broadens the base at the end of the day. But the stories, the stories that were going for kids, if you look at some of the Silver Age stuff, that was like the early manga, if you will. It was just some really wild, anything could happen, use your imagination. It's called silly, but it was more imaginative than a lot of the stuff that they have going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime we look back on it, it's like, oh, this, I'm like, no, it wasn't that the stories were bad. Who's the audience? And the audience was thoroughly entertained. The audience was thoroughly entertained to the point that top sellers in the Silver Age sold millions of copies, not hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of copies. You had books. What was this like? What was this book? The Blue Streak or Blue Lightning. It was supposed to be this character that they created. I can't remember. I watched this video on it. Supposedly, this was supposed to be the predecessor to Captain America, and it wasn't. Totally.
Oh, those guys. I think might have. No, that is not them. But yes, I think I saw a thumbnail for that. Yeah.
Yeah, just definitely a bait and switch video if there ever was one. But you look at the character who's created in the 40s, and the book isn't canceled until Fred Wortham's Seduction of the Innocent kind of forced it to the point like, look, we're already not selling very well, and we got this, so we're just going to give up the ghost on these particular things. And that book was repackaged. They did reprints on it because they had enough issues that had gone through the Golden Age. But it was like, look, who's the audience that these guys are going for? And even though they're not even making the numbers they want to with this particular character, that book ran for over 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay, they had kids writing in letters like, why is this guy the lead? We want to read the stories about this guy. And they couldn't do it because they had a contractual obligation to make certain they said like Blue, I forget the name of the character, like Blue Lightning or something of that nature. His name had to be this. It was like Blue Lightning Comics featuring Charlie Danger. You know, because Charlie Danger was the one that the kids always wanted to do, and then they wanted to read. But you're also looking at, look, who is the audience? Okay, are you hitting that? Because even when they look at these stories, like, oh, these stories are terrible. Yeah, but that book lasted for 10 years, where some of these books can't get off the ground for a couple of months. Yeah. Okay, and didn't have the production issues that an Image Comics had. With everything that it had going for it. So this whole look back, oh, look at this looks so stupid. Hey, if you don't like the character, fair enough. What was the import of the character? Okay, why was the character created? If that works within the line and you don't necessarily like, that's fine. Okay, but at the very least, be fair. And then you have characters that were created to do certain things that never went anywhere, and they had a ton of push behind them. Characters like Scarecrow, even it starts off as him and becomes Warlock, and then Adam Warlock. He got a ton of push, for years, for decades. This is a character that at the end of the day, a lot of fans like, but was never able to successfully support a series, past a certain thing. Yeah. And is, really known being for more of a supporting character, even though a lot of guys do like him. So, you have characters that people like, and you're like, well, hey, this, if you look at it, this guy keeps coming back. But if I'm going to be fair, he never seemed to really click in terms of being more than a fan favorite character. Getting past that to saying, okay, no, he can actually sell a book, and that's something that happens with characters like Wolverine and the Punisher, who are these supporting characters, and they just get like real lightning at the moment, and Wolverine goes off and never looks back, becomes his own solo character. And then if anybody had told me that the Punisher character would be carrying 3-4 books in the 1990s, and I'm like, well, what's the draw to this guy other than he's killing mob people? You're going to run out eventually, right? We got a book where we're talking about the weapons.
That was a quarterly book. They had at least either 4 or 3 times a year. Punisher Armory, I had those. And
Punisher Armory, Punisher War Journal. I think there was another one too, and and you look at some of the stories that are coming out, and you're like, okay, like, okay, and you guys are really into this. But guys were eating it up. They really liked it. So I think that's a more fair way to go with it. You have characters that are created, they don't hit, they don't click. Okay, you have characters that are created, and the fans love them, but there's no story to this guy. It's just like a character you look and it's like, oh, such a cool costume, great visual, almost like Moon Knight. What guys love this dude, and he has series after series, and nothing's really going on with this dude. Past some of those early stories with mention Sienkiewicz, those early stories at the end of the day. A lot of people do like the Lemire stuff, but that was such a departure from the origins of the character that's a totally different thing for me. But and again, you're a comic creator. I'm a comic reader. Okay, would love to do some more comic reading, but comic reader at the end of the day. But if I can see that as a reader and not torch everything that I get, and this stuff I really despise. I could easily do a 2-hour show on Superman 22, and they'd have to, literally put me in a straitjacket and lock me up for 3 days afterwards because I dislike the story so much. But you can still be fair to all the other things that are there. This right over here never came across as fair. Just like, I'm going to bash this thing. And I don't know. When it comes to the arts, we don't really push back. If somebody says, hey, I sold, or let me not do the sales, but, this was terrible, and I came on and I did this. There's very little pushback when it comes to that type of stuff with the arts. Like, well, but the sales, this was a top 10 book. So at what point does it stop being a top 10 book and you get brought on? And kind of, force the onus of, look, no, it was a top 10 book, but they did want to go in a different direction, and that's why I was brought on. I think that would be cool. Especially since, and I've said this before, I think when Liefeld is about history, he's very good. When it's a observation, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. My last bit would be that, a lot of people, you wouldn't, whereas I think the same, because the other thing is like, who is it? On one side, I think when Rob talks about X Factor, he always talks about Walter Simonson, but we can't just slight Louise Simonson because she was the one behind the direction of X Factor, trying to get these guys to be heavyweights like the X-Men, not to be considered weak. And at the same time, she took on the New Mutants and, held that book up for as long and was working with Rob on that, not just as a scripter, but at the same time, that was a period where Jim Lee and Rob were kind of pushing the plots to the side to kind of throw in as much as they could. Or your plot is here, we're going to deal with these small pages. I'm going to expand. I want to take your plot and we're going to expand the stuff that I find cool or X out. I think there's a hint that I don't know if it's actually him, but I think it's, well, anyway, they talk about Louise, an artist asking Louise for more soda, X-Men in the soda shop, and then got action pages, and then the artist saying those pages won't sell, even though he asked for them. But so I don't know if that was Rob, but it's a possibility. But
sounds like Rob. That sounds just like Rob.
But Louise, thankfully, on the exit of the X-Men and X titles, after successfully pushing X Factor, got her goal. Got her goal when she went to Superman. She became a part of the Superman team, got her own title, and took for John Bogdanove with them, and then they got to get their fruits there, and they were part of the Doomsday thing. So, hey, thankfully DC, you did right, and you gave a creator who had been with Chris Claremont as editor, been the editor way back at I'm putting some respect on Louise's name, because her name is there. You ain't hear them mention her name at all, so I'm putting some respect on. She got to Superman, they gave her a title, and they got to the Doomsday thing. So it's very much a part of that Superman family. So thank you, DC, for seeing the talent, and she put forth a strong effort on that. But I think what they do, like 80 issues together, maybe she did more than that. She did maybe up to almost close to 100, but that's a decent run on a Superman book on her own title. So
no, she's part of a team, that whole Triangle era team, that is probably never going to happen again. So, but
the Carlini team.
Yeah, they just don't. I don't see that ever happening again with any book, simply because of the fundamentals of comics have changed. But being part of that team, especially with the whole death of Superman, that was just I'm pretty certain she's looking back and happy about the decision and the opportunity to be a part of the Superman books, and probably never look back. And then I get to see her at cons, or when I do see her at cons, all the guys still come over to have her sign the New Mutants books.
Yes. Yeah. No. That would be a delight. Actually, my delight is I was on some Facebook thing, and they put up Power Pack, and I was like, they should make an animated series of this today. Like, it seems like a no-brainer. And she gave a like to that. So, I mean, yeah, just a top talent, and at the same time, she hasn't said too much negative about him, outside of having the outside be square windows and inside be like cylinders, the circular rounded off cylinders. But
could you even imagine that Louise Simonson on a podcast with somebody trashing anyone, let alone Rob Liefeld? Could you even imagine it?
Yeah. But that's the thing. The hard part is that you put the eggs in the basket, and you find out that Rob and all those guys were just holding the baton for a little while. They were going to pass, they were going to drop the baton and say, you guys pick it up. We're going for another race now. But, it made a ton of money for the people. So, I can't fault them for putting their eggs behind. I think that's the same thing. She's like saying as a freelancer, you understand how this, dealing with talent, how they can be. But anyway, all right. So thank you for being a part of this, and just trying to correct it. It's like saying, hey, the numbers went up, but it wasn't it wasn't in the same stage as like Namor, Doctor Strange, anything that wasn't selling for anything and went to the direct market and wasn't selling at newsstand. It wasn't that. Come on, guys. And pull out your paperwork.
Doctor Strange has been around since the 60s and has been perpetually in a situation where his book is not going anywhere. Okay, and again, that's what he's one of the fundamental characters of the Marvel universe at the end of the day. And but he's a tough character. He's a tough character to get. I mean, with the exception of that, the series that starts with Frank Brunner on those covers.
Yeah.
I think that's volume 2.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah.
It's that's a tough. People say Superman's a tough character to write. No, Doctor Strange is that's a tough character to write.
Well,
and you see it.
He's the thing of it is there's so many classic things from Ditko when he was plotting it by himself with Stan scripting it, and Frank Brunner and Steve Englehart, Roger, Roger Stern with Paul Smith and what's the name? They got so many great talents, and then even after that, the guy who does all the Punisher comic books, Chris Warner, he did a gorgeous run on there with I think Peter Gillis. And it's just like the book just never caught. So many great talents on it, but it just never caught, which is kind of, what can you say? It's it's one of the few times where Stan was like, all right, I'm going to hand the scripting off to Denny O'Neil because, I was like, I'm not really into this. But anyway, thank you guys. It's been a while, but hopefully we'll be able to get you guys some more content soon. Spin Rack.
Some more comic book hero. Look out for some great. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a really big fan. I usually wait up late at night for Petey to drop whatever he's going to talk about, the latest comic book stuff. I like to watch it just to see the hands. All right, and don't worry, Spin Rack. We're always out there. You'll see us all again as soon as we can all get it together.
All right, Spin Rack
out.
Out. Later.